Look at that. And the wee Chinese fucking Korean War man hat as well. Excellent.
It was bought off the internet, off the interwebs. I think one of the signs of descending into sort of disgraceful old age is that there once would have been a time where I would never have even ventured outside without wearing leather pants. Then it became only wearing black. Now it becomes, look it, come on, I'll just wear a tracksuit and go outside, you know?
Yeah, but sure, you
So,
played football. You've played football for years, so how did you do that in leather pants?
well, that's the fucking thing, you know? But what you do is you go to the game dressed in your heavy metal accoutrement, and then you would play and then you would come out. But now I'm kind of like, oh, I'm just going to go wearing a tracksuit. So this is, like I said, this is sort of Eastern European war criminal styles, squatting Slav tracksuit.
Back in the day, whenever we would casually wear bullet belts around the town and whatnot, would you have hung your bullet belt up in your little training locker when you were going to play football? Yeah.
That's a very interesting question. Um, I mean, the proper answer is yes, of course. But I mean, I think that like even during the summer, you would still have leather trousers, a bullet belt, and a fucking Samael shirt or something. And it didn't matter how fucking hot it was or where you were, you would be wearing that. And then I always said, don't be one of those fucking, scaldy fucking owl lads who just go, don't care anymore. So the thing is, like, this is a full green camouflage tracksuit outfit, bought off the interwebs for no low expense with a green hat, which you notice that has taken the place of the black hat. But
And so did you buy this off AliExpress or did you fucking give Adidas their fair dues?
no, I bought it off some scumbag from Manchester who was selling cheap tracksuits on eBay. So job lot.
Yeah.
So
I remember reading about back in the day, Sepulture, whenever they were kids, they couldn't afford bullet belts. They used
yeah,
to get bullets and glue them onto belts. Like
yeah,
how
that's
good is that?
actually Steve from Slaughterlord, Steve Hughes, comedian Steve Hughes. He told me that once upon a time he used to present MTV Australia Heavy Metal Headbangers Ball back in like 92 or 91 or something. And one of his interviews was with Sepultura, and he asked them about that exact same thing. And they said that, yeah, they made bullet belts out of batteries and painted them and glued them to belts. And that when Max bought his first guitar, this is a cute story, he didn't realize that you needed an amp to make it sound like that. And he just bought a guitar with no amp. And they were like, why doesn't it sound like how it sounds in 1983, you know?
That's what Jason Newsted attributed his bass style to. Said the first couple of years of playing the bass, he didn't have an amp. So he
Well,
would just percussively play the bass, you know?
remember playing, me and Keith from Cruachan. I used to have a black metal band in like the end of 91, start of 92 called Rahur Quit, which is like some sort of Crowleyan saying or some sort of chapter in the book of the law. And we used to go out and rehearse in a priest's garage in Tala, in Jobstown, near Jobstown in Kilnarden in Tala. And he used to let bands rehearse in the front room, but there was only a tiny little amp that never worked, or you had to rehearse through a stereo. But alternatively, what you could do is hold the bass against this big wooden table, and then it would be like bang, dong, 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 and you would have the resonance of the bass through the table. So, but
Didn't,
yeah,
uh, didn't Venom used to rehearse in a church hall as well back in the Satan days?
there you go. And the thing about it is, when you think about it, me and Keith and this other lad, what was his name? Steve, I think. We did this in the end of 91. And if there were cassettes of that, because it was kind of like really primitive war metal, kind of Keith was playing the drums. It was just like bang, dong, 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 dong. The kind of thing now would be cult, you know? But like we were doing that, like 1991 is only 11 years after Welcome to Hell, or 12. And if you think about it now, it's 34 years ago. That breaks my brain because to me, an album from 2000 is still a new one, you know? Like Violent Revolution is still the new Creator album, you know?
I kind of guess it is in the sense that that was the blueprint that all the albums after kind of followed, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, I know what you mean, but it's still 24. Oh, no, hang on. Is it? Yeah, 24, 25 years old. Like it's older than
Your
the whole first.
listeners will not believe this, but and Alan will attest that Creator came to Ireland twice on that tour, and they played
Yeah.
in Name and Domes, and it was packed. And then they played in Belfast in the Rosetta, and they had to get like a ferry at 5 o'clock. So the gig started at like 1 o'clock in the day, and there was like about 15 people at it or something like that. And then they came back after that. Like it's crazy how even at that stage they were still willing to have horrendous gigs in Belfast, then come back the next year for another gig. You know.
Yeah, I mean, Dublin, I think there may have been only 200 people at that gig. And I remember speaking to Millie about that. And I sort of said to him, like, look, I think we met in like 99 or 2000. I was speaking to him for a bit in some car park in Essen, Primordial was playing or something. And I mean, just chatting to him. And I had an old Pleasure to Kill shirt. And I said, oh, will you sign my fucking t-shirt? And maybe it was 99 something. And I just sort of said, look, I don't mind Endorama. In fact, I actually prefer it more than some of Outcast and some of the other ones. But at the same time, like, I think it was sort of understood that you had to give the band a little bit of leeway to maybe come back to Violent Revolution. But everyone at the time was just like, no. And he said to me, I think they'd gone from selling 300,000 records to like 30 or 40. Like literally the fan base was like, no. And I think they support.
Being on Gun Records, that kind of crack, late 90s crack.
They supported Moonspell, I think, on that tour, trying to make goth metal. And it just doesn't work, does it? You can't get to change streams in the middle of a career. Very few bands are able to do that,
It actually probably worked out very well for them in the sense that they probably had a huge fan base of people in the 80s who were teenagers and stuff. And then those people all went off to listen to Pink Cream 69 or whatever Germans were listening to in 1995.
Pink
And
Bubbles
then
Go
by
Ape.
the time 2000 came around, they were like, middle-aged kind of metal guys, they could go back into being into Destruction and Creator and stuff.
Well, it was just a huge record, Violent Revolution. I mean, think about it. In 2000, the tides were turning back towards traditional heavy metal. I mean, I remember seeing, I don't know if you went to Dynamo, it was either 97 or 98, and it was Iced Earth, Blind Guardian. I think Saxon were playing, and there was a definite, like, I think it was the first time Dynamo had gone, okay, we'll see how trad metal works out. And nobody expected the tent to be as fucking rammed for Saxon. And it was this, Death were playing, so it must be 98. And there was this move, but Hammerfall had just come out. People don't realize how important Glory to the Brave was. And it was swinging the pendulum back a bit towards traditional heavy metal. And I think without some of those records, I mean, a band like Creator couldn't have like linked back into thrash in 2000, but they all were moving back towards that because they spent the whole time of the 90s just being lost and not knowing what to fucking do.
Yeah, well, that's 100% true. I get the weird thing, I suppose, to say about all that, man, is that it's, again, even though it seems like new music to me and you, it's old fart records in that regard. Like, these records are now considered really, 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 really old. I think like Creator have done an amazing job to the detriment of people like me and you, like who like their 80s material, so that if you go and see them now, they only play 2 or 3 songs from the 80s because they have to play all these kind of songs from nowadays that the kids like. And there's very few other thrash bands who've been able to do, like Death Angel. Like if you go and see them, their new records are really well received and people like them. But most people, you kind of have to trade on the 80s catalog, don't you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, Exodus still, people love the fucking 2000, 2003, or what is that record? War's My Shepherd and Blacklist, Temple of the Damned. People like the new Destructions of Creator. I think what Creator did was very clever is that they didn't do every tour. They only played headline shows and they only played big things and they put all the video screens and all this kind of stuff. And they made it seem, to be honest, kind of like they're bigger than they were. I mean, if you were to look at, like, say, the Testament, Anthrax, Creator shows coming up, Anthrax is clearly the biggest selling of all time band on that bill. Probably Testament, I would imagine, back in their day would have sold more records than Creator, but it's Testament who are opening, and it'll be Creator ending with all the video screens. And, I mean, is Coma Souls more well known than, what's the Anthrax record from 90?
Persistence of Time?
No, certainly not.
No, it's definitely not. But I know somebody who works at MCD, and they told me how many tickets they'd sold for that gig. Like, and you probably wouldn't be massively surprised by guessing how many tickets were sold. Look,
Well, the thing about it is, I think there's something happening in that. I think MCD, who are the main, I guess they own the 03 or whatever, the 05 or what the 5 something or other. And rather than it sit empty,
Point Depot.
they move the capacity in, and they rather have something there than nothing there. So I mean, I would imagine there'll be 4 or 5 thousand people there. I guess that's
I think that would be a reasonable estimate. And like again, we probably talked about this a bit in the past that Dublin actually doesn't have any good medium-sized venues. You know, it's either 1,000 or 2,000 cap, and then arenas. There's no like
yeah.
three
There's
or four
no
thousand these
no
halls. You know,
there's not. I mean, the Olympia and Vicar Street are like 1,600, 15, 16, 1,700, but there's no like 2,500 or 3,000. You go from that to the small of maybe. I mean, there's what's that fucking Helix, and there's other venues. There's the one which Heilung played in, which takes about the Board Gosh Theatre takes maybe 3,500, 4,000, but they don't
yeah,
want
they're
that.
not going to let you in the front or the back door of that
No,
place, man.
no, absolutely not. So I think that what that Crater did was very clever. When you can compare it to Destruction, maybe is they weren't going to go on tours playing to 150, 200 people because they needed the money. They were going to be like, you know what, we'll sit all the tours out, build momentum back, and we'll be very clever about how, Hey Tuberales and all these kind of new songs are. And regardless of what anybody like me or you thinks, where we go, ugh, it doesn't, Extreme Aggression is a much better record or something. If you're 19, 21, 22 now, I'm not sure I'm not sure there's a huge big difference sonically. You can hear the difference in Endless Pain and what they are now, but Coma Souls to the stuff now, I mean, you could be, you can tell, but I'm not sure. Like if you look up the streaming numbers, I mean, lots of new songs have the biggest streams.
Yeah, absolutely. Like,
But that said, those songs were only put online 15, 20 years ago. If you added the streams from, if they were released in 1986, then the streams would be very different. But
yeah, they certainly would. Yeah, it's weird. The thrash revival, even though there was all these great albums coming out in 2003 and 2002, like whatever, Coma Souls, Temple of the Damned, or whatever, it actually took a few years until you started getting bands like Testament and Anthrax being like, okay, things are now commercially viable for us to start touring again. So it was around 2007 that actually, like around the time that Gama Bomb and all these other bands got signed, whenever there was enough public interest to make it happen.
yeah,
In 2003, after Exodus brought out Temple of the Damned, I saw Exodus, Nuclear Assault, Agent Steel, God Dethroned, Grave, and a whole bunch of bands in Sheffield, and there were like 15 or 20 people at it. I saw Exodus and
really,
in Leeds, and about 15 or 20 people in it, and that was like 2003.
really.
So there was a big, like, that era from 2003 to 2007, a lot of those bands like Exodus or Nuclear Assault or Death Angel were going around, as you said, playing to less than 150 people.
Yeah.
Anthrax, whenever they did that We Come For You All tour with Stamping Ground, they were doing that in Europe. Some places there was only like 200 or 300 people at them,
Yeah.
But yeah, it just goes to show, like, the idea is that, like, there was a huge resurgence in this kind of music. And actually what happened was Greater and Exodus and stuff all brought out good records and then did some hard years of touring, and that kind of brought the interest back, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the pendulum just swung back. The 90s was such a weird moment. And then when you had 2003, 2002, 2004, even it's the same for black metal. It's the same for the likes of the Watain and bands like that brought. There's many other bands as well, but they're kind of the early 90s black metal. By the end of the 90s, the Cradles and the Dimmus had become these sort of, I suppose one would say pantomime versions of what black metal was, and the underground had forgotten it. And, by 98, 99, 2000, there was all these rumblings in the underground, these new kind of bands coming along. And I suppose thrash was just part of that. And now everything is in its dotage, and everything has this sort of, like Anthrax, Testament, and Creator will pull all of the old thrashers out from the fibre of the Midlands and everything in Ireland out to maybe make 4,000 or 5,000 people come to the
here's a question for you. Why is it that Cradle of Filth can go and do like theatres around the UK, but Venom can't? Like, would you not imagine that Venom should be able to go and do like that kind of successful UK tour? Or is there like so much brand damage rather, that people don't give a frig?
I mean, I would want to see some of the attendance figures of a Cradle small, sort of theater tour. I mean, Are they pulling more than 600 people to something in Sheffield or Manchester? 800, 1,000?
I think
It's not.
if they can sell out the Academy and the Limelight one in Belfast, those are both like 800 seaters. So I would
Sure.
imagine that's probably what it is. Like, you
Yeah,
know.
sure. And which is not bad, which is, considering back in the day they were selling how many records in the UK. But it's a long time since Venom. Venom never, I suppose what happened is that Saxon, a band like Saxon, who are like hard rock legends and have come back, and can go on tour and pull 800 to 1,000 people and play, Sheffield this and Nottingham that. And there's going to be 750 to 1,200. They, even though Saxon in the 90s went to like 50 to 100, 150 people, Venom's stock is different because they don't, who do they bring really? Like old, crusty, fucking black metal people who complain that it's not fucking Mantis and, and not a Baden like me, but they don't bring hard rock fans. Do you know what I mean? They don't, Venom was like a huge sort of cultural zeitgeist movement, but did they really keep their fans into the end of the 80s who just were loving hard rock?
No.
No.
And I think there's a bit of a like Manowar. Now, obviously, Manowar were way bigger, but there's a bit of a bravado kind of with Venom and Neat Records where, you know, as much as they were selling, does anybody know how many copies of black metal Neat Records sold in 1982? Because
Well,
I would be really surprised if they sold 100,000 copies in
I think
total.
I honestly, I think way more than that. I mean, according
But
to,
if they sold like 100,000 copies in the UK,
I think,
then they would have been having like more of a kind of I don't know. It seems to me like there would have been those fans, like people who are like Haircut 100 fans, where they were 14 when this
how
band were
long
huge.
before it took you to mention haircut one? I think, yeah, exactly. I think that like Nick Hayward. Anyway, I think that like, I mean, it says in the liner notes of one of the CDs that Venom Black Metal sold 1,000,000 copies. Now, I'm skeptical of that, but I will say if something like like
1 million copies, then Neat Records would have been a viable business.
sure, which I think they just, I think what it is that they didn't know how to collect the money more or less than that they were a total ripoffs. And if you think that like, and they were licensing copies to all these countries in the world, and they didn't know how many sold. I mean, are you telling me that in South American licenses of black metal in 82 to 86 didn't sell 150,000? Or, I mean, French license.
I well believe that they didn't sell that amount because I think that
Oh,
if someone told me that Kill 'Em All sold that amount in South America, I'd be like, yeah, I could understand that. But it's, I think what I'm saying to you is that, like, yeah, it's selling 1 million copies over the course of 40 years seems probable, but I don't think it sold 1 million copies in
well,
6 months or
okay.
500,000 copies
Well,
in
let's say
6
this
months.
then. I mean, I read that, however we're to believe this, that stuff like the first Angel Witch did like 400,000, even Pile Driver kind of stuff like that did like 100, 120,000. I mean, Venom Black Metal had to have been bigger than the first Angel Witch album.
Big
And
time.
it
But
had to.
at the same time, it's such a weird thing because we are dealing in total conjecture here. Like we're literally saying this is what I think it did, or if it did this, then why didn't it do that? Like, you know,
But I think back then though, people were just like sort of like selling licenses to different countries and not having an accountability of how many copies were pressed and sold in each territory. And I think it's quite. I think you could probably make a case that by 84, 85, maybe Neat sold those licenses for fuck all, 10, 20, 30,000 sterling or whatever it was. And then if you'd actually checked how much copies were sold in, let's say France Carrera Records, like I have a French version of black metal. Um, Arguably 82. I mean, it should have or could have sold 30, 40,000 in France. And then
yeah,
Belgium
like
and Holland and Germany. Before you add it up, it's got to get up to 300,000, 400,000.
I suppose the idea that in 1984 they were able to go and play like a series of 3,000, seater kind of gigs, the 7 Dates of Hell, would lend you to believe that they definitely had a big enough following to do that, you know? But
Don't forget also that there wasn't really a touring circuit for a band like Venom then. There was other huge big bands, and then there was a sort of, early 80s cover band stuff. And there were huge big bands, but like the sort of, they're not playing bars, they're not playing clubs to 300, 400. They're playing like 600 to 1,500 places theoretically, and they did play them in 82 and 83. I just don't know. It has to have sold 250,000 copies in that year. Like it has to, if you add it up, and there's 10,000 or 25,000 from Japan, and you know.
Well, yeah, you know what, you could be right that it could be a couple of 100,000, but I was just postulating the idea that, as you said, if there was a legion of 13-year-old spotty Venom fans, then how come they weren't able to do what other bands like that had done? Like, you know, even a band like Praying Mantis had some sort of following whenever they were about in the late 70s or early 80s, so that they could come back 10 years later and do it. And Venom, there's one UK tour. There's the UK tour with Exodus, and that's it. They didn't do any other UK tours, did they?
But don't forget, they came back and headlined the whole of Dynamo in '96. No one gave a shit about Praying Mantis. You know what I mean? Like Praying Mantis on tour now with 50 to 150 people, but Venom sort of won't allow themselves to go on tour. That's what they just won't do, because they won't play a Tuesday to 200 people. But I mean, to be honest with you, like, it's very few bands who can pull more than 500 people on a Tuesday or Wednesday. Even bands who sold millions of records in the 80s, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, who is pulling? I mean, Saxon aren't pulling 1,500 people on a Monday in Germany. I mean, it's more like 400 or 500, you know.
I went to go and see Jackson Browne at Glastonbury one year, right?
Okay.
And he was playing on the Sunday. On the Saturday night, he was playing a show in the acoustic tent, and Stevie Wonder was headlining the main stage.
Okay.
And then the girlfriend of the time made me leave Stevie Wonder and go and see Jackson Browne, right? And there was about 20 people at Jackson Browne.
Yeah.
So it's the same idea. It's just like if you're comparing the idea on a Monday of sitting in your house or going down the road to go and see Primordial or Gama Bomb or anyone, like, you're just going to have a shit Monday, you know?
Yeah. I mean, yes and no. I mean, it depends. It's just, we're talking about bands who theoretically sold hundreds of thousands, if not millions of records back in the day. And you're saying, why can't they now trade on, whatever it was 30, 40 years ago? And Venom did trade on it in the 90s when they came back to play huge, huge shows. It's just by now, that thing from 96, 81, 82 to 96 is only 10, 14, 15 years. I feel like everything has kind of worn its welcome out a bit from the 80s, in a sense,
Big time, man. I feel the same way about anything about the 80s, where you used to feel excited about a Saxon album coming out, or you're excited that, Steve Zetro was back in Exodus, and now you're kind of like, I want things to move on a bit. Says me or you.
Yeah, but I mean, I did a podcast this a while ago, is that the things that were exciting and vibrant and youthful and aggressive and whatever, like all this death metal is 35 years old. Altars of Madness is 35 years ago. Like, and kids now who like Thy Art Is Murder, Fit for an Autopsy, Slaughter to Prevail, they listen to, who I've tried to listen to, and I go, okay, it's chunky and heavy, but I don't get the vocals and the riffs, and I can see why it's very popular. But, to them, if you're 21 or 22 years old, unless you're in a niche in the underground, I mean, Altars of Madness is it's a fucking old record. Deicide now are playing at their 55,
A huge issue for young people. As far as I know, man, a huge issue for young people when they're listening to music or getting into bands and whatnot is the production of the music, So, like, that's probably part of the reason why bands like Metallica or Nirvana or Guns N' Roses kind of, like, they've been able to cross generations, Whereas I think that there are a bunch of death metal people or thrash people who don't listen to Whiplash or don't listen to Sarcophago because they're like, these albums sound shit,
I think that's part of it, but I also think that if you're for your average, like I walked by a guy in the street today wearing a Fit for an Autopsy shirt, and we probably would have had literally no bands we would cross over with, but we would probably be fundamentally in the metal scene together. But you realize that the bands that he likes now, mine are 35 years ago. And when you were 20 or whatever, when we think of the things we liked when we were 20, in 1990, I wasn't going out listening to fucking Budgie and fucking Molly Hatchet. And I mean, I did in a couple of years after that, but not compared to Altars of fucking Madness. This was death metal at its zeitgeist, its cultural zeitgeist moment. It's youthful sort of imperium involved in making the music of these people between 20 and 30. And if you asked a 20-year-old at the time like me to go, hey, well, do you want to hear the version of that from 1971? Okay, he grew up with Sabbath and stuff, but compared to Altars and Madness at the time, that's all he wanted to hear. So it's not
Yeah, but
that.
like the one thing is, man, because people have now such access to music at the touch of a button, because of Spotify and stuff.
Yeah,
Like you'll meet 20-year-olds who are insanely obsessed with Budgie and dress up in a Budgie manner or
sure.
alters a mad
But I
or
guarantee you, there's not more than 2,500 but 18-year-old Budgie fans in the whole of fucking the world. You know what I mean?
well, they all go
Whereas,
to fucking, they all go to Muscle Rock every year. You could do
yeah,
a
all 600 of them,
good
sure.
beer here. Fucking sec.
So he's left me to talk about tracksuits. Yeah, I mean, green camouflage tracksuits bought off a scallywag in Manchester. I mean, it's like I was had some sort of premeditation about the Oasis reunion. Um, it was like it came to me in a premonition, and it said, if you buy the tracksuit, they will come, they will reform. And here we are. Having said that, they aren't paying me my financial dividend. I'm getting no percentage of the gig receipts for my spiritual premonition. Oh, there you are. Yeah, I don't know, man. I think it's like, okay, McCardles. I think that like anything now that's 25, 30, 35 years old, if you're 19, 20, you just instinctively go, fuck off with your old music. And I get it. I totally get it, because I would have been like, fuck off with your 1976, whatever, in 1990 and 1989, because all I wanted to hear was Death, Leprosy, and Pestilence and Morbid Angel,
Okay, but this is like this. Like I heard you saying on the way in, but this is the crazy thing because that Oasis record is fucking 30 years old.
Yep.
So
Well,
you know,
their last,
that have to connect with all these young people because I guarantee you, all the people who are going to the gig, it's not going to be a load of slapheads. It'll be young kids, like.
yes and no. I don't think only exclusively. I think there'll be an awful lot of people trying to relive their late 90s moment. But don't forget, Oasis split up in like what, the early 2000s or something. It's not like they split up in 1983 or something. Like,
Yeah,
and also
it was.
don't forget, Oasis record sales are probably like 250 million compared to some of the bands we're talking about sitting at like 2 million or 1 million.
Yeah, we like when we were talking during the week, we are like, yeah, man, we'll have to do like a conversation about the Oasis reunion and somehow get it back to talking about the Gallagher brothers in Raven instead. Like.
Yeah, which was like, I mean, that would be amazing if you had I would like a sort of split album, or sort of that Oasis would invite out the Gallagher brothers from Raven out to play a sort of a back and forth, kind of like they could do Lambs of Slaughter, Rock Till You Drop or Wiped Out or something, and then play Wonderwall in between and have the Gallagher brothers solo over it
They,
and stuff,
they both seem like they would have like a vested interest in having the starter ends of the songs, having the bands making stupid arguments in the studio. You know that idea of having really annoying dialogue tracks of people being all like, "Oh, it's too loud, mate," and all
Well,
that bollocks.
what do you think that the Raven brothers could just, and we have to say that they're from Raven. There's an awful lot of people listening to us going, who the fuck are they talking about? Because it's such a niche, like, fucking conversation. But do you think that, like,
There's like 7,000 people a month on Spotify listening to Raven. What
yeah,
is
well,
wrong with the world?
it's grown from about 1 or 2,000 in the last couple of years because they're coming back a bit. But at the point, but I mean, I would like to see Raven supporting Oasis in a sort of Gallagher brothers sort of solidarity movement. And I would like to see like Crow Park and like Raven come out and support. We should start some sort of petition for that.
Totally. And I'm willing to have any petition of a similar mind, like Philly Byrne from Gama Bomb and David Byrne from the Talking Heads. You could both wear linen suits and I don't know, you could win
Yeah,
still wine.
but that would make, I mean, it would annoy Talking Heads fans, but I'm sure Philly would be chuffed with that. You know what I mean?
You'd be fucking delighted.
But Oasis, yeah, I suppose Oasis fans would really, really, they'd love if Raven come out and did only like Rock Till You Drop or Wiped Out.
Yeah, like I honestly think if they got Raven to support them at these gigs, that there would be a better turnout. You could sell out times 1.025.
It is a beautiful thought, but I sadly feel, I think that this might be the only YouTube channel or podcast where anybody's talking about this particular thing in the entire world. That there should be a sort of Gallagher solidarity.
Solidarity, brother. Solidarity with Raven. But yeah, like I'm sure we've talked about Raven a whole bunch in this podcast before, but
Yeah, that's why the numbers are so huge with the listening numbers, because everybody's like, I wonder if they're going to talk about Raven again.
going to draw in all those Raven fanatics.
Yeah, 20, 30,000 views on this YouTube thing or whatever. I mean, you're kind of digging your own grave in some of the things that you talk about, But Oasis, hey, but no, I mean, nobody cares what we think about, Oasis, mind you, but whatever.
I guess just because you're wearing the tracksuit has kind of like compelled me to, think about it because it's of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, you're reaching a certain moment in your life where you're on eBay shopping for tracksuits, It used to be, yeah, I should be on the dark web buying like, drugs and midget hookers and all that kind of thing. Instead, I'm buying tracksuits on the eBay,
You should be on the dark web buying yourself a dark funeral tracksuit because John Roach, our guitar player, has one.
What?
And it's a matching set. Yeah.
Hang on, that must have been bought from like fucking Singapore or Thailand or something.
Yep. Philly's got an REO Speedwagon one as well. So,
having said that, I did see a lad wearing a Meanies tracksuit. That's a very Irish reference for anybody who doesn't understand. It's like a very cult snack, like a fucking crisp snack here. Meanies.
Yeah.
But and he was wearing a Meanies tracksuit, which is a sort of green tracksuit, but
Would you wear a Space Raiders tracksuit, would you?
I don't know what Space Raiders is.
It's okay. That's okay. That's fine. Now, one of the things that we did say that we were going to talk about was festivals.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Let me stop this and start the next one. Hang on. So what festivals did you play or did you do this summer? I'm not sure. Or did you do any of what's going on?
What's been going on with Gama Bomb? Not a whole pile up. We played a Burbeck or whatever the heck it's called, a metal fest with who was at like Heathen and a bunch of bands like that, Burning Witches and whatnot.
Oh yeah.
And it was grand. It was just like this place outside Nantes, and they put us up in this big weird chateau, and we stayed there all weekend. And it was actually a whole weekend of sitting beside a lake reading books.
That sounds okay. Did you feel like Louis the 14th or 15th or anything like this?
Yeah, we were just like looking up like crazy what the Germans were doing there during the war and whatnot. It was one of those weird ones where because you're headlining and you're on last, you just kind of have to hang about the whole time, and the only beer available was like 7%. So it's not as if you could just sit and have a couple of normal beers.
Yeah, even this summer, we're at something or other, and somebody said to me, I can't remember which one it was. Somebody said, will you come down at like 3 or 4? And then I looked at the schedule, and you're like on at 11:15. I said, look, if I come down at 3 or 4 and I get giddy and stupid and start talking about fucking Morbid Saint and Nunslaughter or something, and Incubus, what do you this? And Rotting Christ demos and stuff, I'm going to be like, at about 6 p.m., I'm going to be like, I could just have a glass of wine now. And then it's going to go, to get to being a bit too, a little bit, just a tiny bit too festive, a little bit too buzzed. So you're better off mooching around, sort of,
Yeah, like what we try and do is like go, like arrive at the festival at about 2 or 3, hang about, have lunch, have a couple of beers, and then go back at about like 6, and then have like sort of 3 hours of just chilling out in the hotel or whatever, and then get there an hour before you go on, kind of thing. But yeah, it's weird. Like it's something that you don't kind of think of. Like the later on in the bill that you end up playing, the more that you have to just kind of remain compos mentis, and you can't really enjoy the festival in the way that a lot of the other people who are there are.
It depends what enjoy means anymore. I mean, it depends what it is. There was a couple. We did quite a lot of festivals this summer, and there was quite a lot that were interesting, odd places. Like one in Italy in this sort of weird little sort of old arena. Like we did Sweden last week or the other weekend. It was in the Pythagoras Museum in Norrtälje. Yeah, the Pythagoras Industry Museum. And I'll tell you what, when we're getting the shuttle to go to said museum, of which I did not know its name, I was talking about fucking Pythagoras in the van. And everybody else was like, yeah, shut up, will you? Now I've been reading this book, which I'm really into about. It's called The Swerve. It's about the start of the Renaissance. Hang on. Oh,
Plug imminent.
plug. It's about the start of the Renaissance, and it's a sort of half, well, let's say 20% fiction, but not fiction, but about, you know, all these what do they call them? Baudelinos, these guys who were paid for by city states and sort of rich patrons to go around Europe trying to find old manuscripts from ancient Greece and ancient Rome. And it's about how they came back into society, and Pythagorean mathematics and stuff. So I was boring everybody by shouting at them about this, and they were just like with their headphones on going, yeah, just shut the fuck up. And then we drove down Pythagoras Street. I was like, what the fuck, you know? Anyway, I mean, come on. You got to give that to me, that was like, and then we got to the Pythagoras Museum, very excited. Everyone else went to sit in another room because I was a bit too excitable, but you know, I know what you mean. You've got to measure your time. Usually when we get there, everybody wants to go straight to sleep. And like Kieran would sleep to literally, I mean, he could miss a gig if you didn't wake him up or the alarm clock didn't go off. As soon as his head hits the pillow, he's like, I'm going to sleep now for like 5, 6, 7, 8 hours if you don't wake him up.
I guess, like, man, what it is some of the guys in bands, if they have kids and stuff like that, they're literally looking at being like, here, I can get 8 hours sleep. This sounds amazing. Let's do that. You know?
Exactly. Well, he has teenagers now, so he's not so bad, but certainly he's just a man who, when his head hits the pillow, he's a fucking goner, you know? But I can't do the afternoon. There's always somebody who'll message me going, oh, what are you doing? Or, well, we're here. And, oh, it's fucking somebody from some band I know. And the pull of, I mean, I have to admit, you know, like wandering around in the crowd and sort of that stuff, again, I can't do that in the mid-afternoon if we're playing at like 8, 9, 10, 11. I have to disappear because otherwise I know I'm not as bad as I used to be, but certainly 10 years ago.
For people out there, what can happen is you'll end up going out to watch a band at about like 2 o'clock, and then you'll end up running into a bunch of headballs and going back to their tent and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then coming back completely fucking pissed out of your head about 3 hours later, being like, oh, I've missed dinner. Oh, we're on soon.
Yeah. Or we're on in 5 hours, 4 hours. What are you going to do? Well, I think the best points, you know, the best course of action right now would be to open that bottle of gin, because I mean, obviously gin is very good for, you know, it's very good for
ruining gigs, things like that.
I was going to say digestion. You know, there'll be some logic as to why that's a good idea. Or if I just have a glass of wine now, then I won't, you know, and just like go easy on it. I won't need to crack open the beers. But of course, you drink wine just like you drink beer, like a fucking idiot, you know?
And there's a hierarchy of importance, and like, not mean to insult your lofty position in things, but like theoretically, if the drummer and the guitar player and stuff were in not completely blitzed, like you could probably get away with the gig a lot better than if your drummer or, you know, someone super important is drunk. Like we did a gig at Hamfest in 2009, and it was on St. Patrick's Day, and Ireland were playing England in the rugby during the day. And we were sitting getting lashed up in our little chalet or whatever. And there was a knock on the door, and they said, are you guys Onslaught? Because we've got your rider here. And we were like, yes, we are. Like, bring it in here, please. Like, anyway, so Paul, our drummer, got absolutely and utterly annihilated. And we spent hours trying to pump coffee into him. We got him to the point where he could play the drums, but his brain was just computing things 2 seconds too late. So anytime he was going for anything, it was always just like sort of off the beat. Like, but yeah, if you're the bass player or the singer, you can kind of get away with it a bit.
It depends on the singing. Like, I would say Primordial fans, I mean, I have been fucked up in the past, but not for the last, I would say since maybe 2010, 2009, 2011. I mean, whiskey drunk is an angry drunk where you're like, fuck off, being a bit G.G. Allen and a bit confrontational, which sort of goes with the black metal, but as in, I can't really sing fucked up. It's happened. And especially if people know all the lyrics and they're like, oh, really? It means that much to you that, you know, it's all about this history and weight and importance, and then you're fucking lolloping around the place, kicking things over. That's not a good look, you know? But thankfully, I haven't done that in fucking years and years. 10, must be 15 years, like, you know?
part of the thing is, I guess as well, like you have muscle memory for the songs that you've played a ton over the last
Yeah,
25 years or whatever,
yeah.
and you don't have muscle memory from the songs from more recently. So it's kind of like you can't depend on yourself to just be able to, like, be doing something else while you're singing those
I
kind of
mean, I think
songs,
for sometimes with Primordial, like if Paul was drunk and he, there's some songs where if you just go bung dung 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 dung, you're pretty much, or you just do, an A or an E, you could be in for most of the fucking song. You know what I mean? Because there's no time changes like Gama Bomb or something. There is in there, but they're not like you could still just go dung 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 for some of it. But like the people who had the problems back in the day were me and Simon, like late to mid 2000s. But I remember we did a tour at Finchall, and me and Samily from Finchall, the guitar player, we took to being drinking buddies, and we would plow our way through probably a half a bottle of whiskey and a half a bottle of vodka each before our shows, drink the other half on stage, come off the stage, do a fucking bunch of lines, then plow into another bottle or whatever, and at 5 a.m. we'd still be up drinking whatever, and we'd do this every day for like 25, 30 days. Just me and him sitting there just doing this. And I mean, you can do it ish when you're 31, 29, 32, but it's a pretty vulgar look if you're still at that when you're like 50, And to be honest, most people aren't anymore. Like having spent a whole summer playing festivals, most people are pretty chill. There's very few like, oh, fucking hell, they're playing. I wonder what the fuck state they're going to be in,
Yeah, there's you would probably remember back in the day, there were certain people like, I'm sure this is an industry secret, like Martin Walker or whatever, were it'd literally be going on exactly like the Tasmanian Devil backstage, and like you would hear crashing noises. Or remember Tommy Angel Ripper throwing a giant pineapple at a window once backstage and being all like, "Oh, this is real rock and roll."
Yeah, well, I mean, it's I mean, 15, 20 years ago, you were 25 and 30, and now, I mean, I think if you're going to be 50 and act the way you were when you were 30, I mean, it just gets a bit tiresome for everybody, a bit like, come on, will you, to fuck, like. So this year has been very chill for us, very quite relaxed. People still have a drink and still have a wee bit of a carry on. But at like 1 a.m., it's like, we got to be in the airport at 4:45. Whereas, you just be like, power through and be in somebody's hotel room fucking talking shite again about the Morbid Saint is a fucking great track, underrated track, this blah, blah, blah. And then like, somebody's like, hey, you got to go on the fucking, and you like cold shower and go, let's fucking go. And you can power through when you're 30 and 35, but now doing it, like it exacts a really heavy toll mentally, and missing an entire night's sleep. Like last weekend, we did 2 nights, and it wasn't anything to do with, being carrying on or anything, but like, hey, airport shuttle is at 4:30, you finish playing at 1:30, and you just lie there with the head buzzing, and you get up and you're like, okay, this is going to be a day where we have no sleep and you have to play. It's yeah. And you understand why people want the soft landing, because the soft landing is I'll have a drink, or the chemical landing is, the Lemmy way, which is, well, what's going to pick you back up from being on the floor is the same thing to put you on the floor in the first place, and those aren't like, the 2 options. You can try and go and sleep in the afternoon if you want, but sometimes you don't get the opportunity. You're like, hey, you're playing at 7:15, and you arrive at the festival at 5, and everybody's like, can we go to the hotel? And you go, hey, we need to, look at amps and look at backdrops, and it's but whinging about it is kind of a sort of fool's errand, because you're doing something that nobody really gets to do. So whinging that you only have 1 or 2 or 3 hours sleep, it seems a bit much really to me,
But it just depends on the situation. Like what you were saying about doing like massive days. I've done like 80-day tours and stuff like that, but I would not be able to like keep on boozing for 80 days. I would have to take days on and days off and stuff. And
yeah,
the worst, like as you were saying, like not getting proper sleep is what completely fucks you up. We did like a 2-week tour of South America, and you had to fly into each country each day or whatever. And so there was like 2 flights a day. And as you said, you were off stage at 1 and getting to the airport at 6. So you were like getting like 3 or 4 hours sleep in little blocks, and then you were getting airplane sick and stuff. So it does get no food, doing all that sort of shit. But as you said, whinging about it whenever you're saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to Paraguay" or whatever, people don't really want to hear your sob story about why you had a bad time in Paraguay. Like,
No, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, also the thing is like, it does get like, especially in those countries, like, like say, sometimes you'll go like, hey, we need to go to the hotel. We're old, or, it's 3 would pick us up at 6. But when you go to like, as you say, Mexico or South America, something, they're like, hey, you have got to go to a record store at 3 and, meet people and whatever. And you don't want to go, oh, really? But they've arranged it anyway without, it being a conversation, with you. But what are you going to do? Like, I feel tired. I mean, come on. Of course, you're always going to feel tired.
yeah, I think there's a bit of an expectation in certain parts of the world, though. Like whenever people bring you somewhere, that they're buying your time when you're there. Like, so they're just like, this is when you will be in X place, and you're not able to move your shuttles, or you can't go to your hotel until
No,
after the game or whatever. And you're just like,
no, no. And what would happen is if when you get there and you come into the hotel, there's like some maniac that you used to write to in like 94, Alan, we must blah, 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 blah. Here's a present of a thing I bought you. And I mean, look, it's great. But we sound like two whinging, sort of.
yeah. You know what? Before we get off the topic of whinging, let me please have a quick whinge about it.
Okay.
As a former hotel owner, see in your
here we go.
whenever you go and check in the fucking hotels, there's always like a queue of people who are being really slowly dealt with, isn't there? Like, it always takes ages to fucking get checked in. What is that about? Like, it doesn't happen in
Okay.
Ireland or.
I think Ireland is very good at this, right? At moving people through queues. But let me say this. What the fuck is going on, especially in like France and Belgium and a few other countries, where like they give you a window to check in, 4 to 7, then you have to ring a number, or you're not allowed to check in until 4. 4, fuck off. Like if you have to, it used to be like 11, 8, you could check in at like 12 to 1. A lot of times we arrive somewhere and they go, oh, check-in isn't for another 4 hours, and you go 4. So that means if I have to leave to go to the airport at 6, I don't get the actual day that I pay for in the evening. Like just to suit your fucking laziness. Oh no, well, it's because I don't want to pay cleaners in the morning.
That ends up being the best pints of the trip. Usually are the ones where whenever you arrive at your destination and it's at like 11 o'clock and you're like, let's have 2 or 3 pints and then we can go to bed or whatever.
I agree, but I'm like, I cannot abide the check-in 4:30, and the check-in is between 4 to 7 in Italy because they have to have siesta until they feel ready to check you in. And then we have to go home for dinner at 7. It's like, fuck you. It's a fucking hotel. Like, it actually makes me fucking furious. I will kick up such a fuss that nobody's going to rest all afternoon until, you've woken everybody up till they have to be as annoyed as you are all afternoon. That sounded really good, actually.
That's the idea, isn't it? Like, you want everybody to feel as upset as you do. Look,
No, it's just a new thing. It's like a post-lockdown thing, which is, hey, hotels don't allow you to check in between 12 and 2 anymore. You fucking wait till 5. So what are we supposed to do? Just mill around the city for the next 4 or 5 hours? Like, fuck off. I went to stay in somewhere in Italy there, between gigs, and they were like, hey, can you, and it wasn't an Airbnb, it was a hotel, but they obviously taking influence from Airbnb. And they were like, hey, can you clean up the kitchen and take your own bins down to the basement? No, I fucking can't. Fuck you. Like, what? Like, I was fucking.
I would refer that to being on like who booked it. Like, so like if festival has booked you a bunch of rooms.
No, this I booked it.
Oh well, there you go.
but it's not like, this is not like a hotel. You don't take out your own trash in a hotel and bring it to the 3 floors down into the basement. And look, we're going off now on a tangent where everybody's going to go, oh, that's the kind of cunt he is. That's the kind of dickhead he is.
I knew it.
He is a fucking, like a fucking some sort of like, little minor details, make him little cranky fucking cunt. No, anyway, let's not talk about you do your do you have anything else to whinge about? I'll give you something to whinge about, right? Which is, now tell me this, have you noticed how compared to a couple of years ago, how, and I was talking to lots of other bands about this, and it's something I was only talking about today, how merch sales have just gone down and down and down and down at festivals, to the point where a lot of bands are just not bringing merch anymore. They just don't bother because it's like the luggage is €60 for the bag across. The shirts are not €3 anymore; they're €8. The shipping of the shirts to you to bring across, the art, the whatever, the 20% commission, the 90% VAT, everything being digitally paid for. Like when I speak to lots of bands, they're just like, there's no fucking point. Because if you sell between 10 and 25, 30 shirts, you're only paying for the process. The days of selling 100, 150, 170 shirts at a festival are long removed. And it's not just because we're not as popular as we were. Which is also,
well, man, is that, like, beer is expensive. Like that place that we were playing there
I know.
last week, with Heathen, pints were 10 quid if you were buying pints, you know. So I can totally understand if people are sitting there being like, I don't have 20 quid to spend. And like, we did Headbangers the week before, and like we did pretty decent on merch at it. But like, you know, again, it's probably a situation where people have their own beer with them. You know, they're kind of,
Yeah.
you know, the beer isn't going to be €10 a pint, so
Well,
you kind of have to work with people's budgets, I guess. Like,
oh no, I'm not. I mean, I totally understand that. I'm not being ignorant to that. But I also think that like this summer, we've noticed that internal flights, lots of flights that used to be between 80 and €140 per band member. Like even like we were just quoted like Dublin to Munich on a Saturday morning in 3 weeks, €695 without luggage, without like single. Like what the fuck? Zurich, you know, sort of like whatever, Frankfurt to Stockholm the other weekend for this gig in Sweden. The normal flight where we could have had some sleep, €710 each. That will be 60% of your fee. And like your fees aren't going up to compensate for that. But what used to compensate for those kind of things is getting there and going, okay, we're going to sell 18 vinyl and fucking 10 CDs and 46 shirts or whatever. Now that's 10, 12, 18. And every band I've spoken to, whether it was, you know, every band I spoke to were just like, yeah, we're selling 70, you know, 50 to 75% less shirts than 5 years ago. And I totally get why. It's the cost of living crisis. It's the price of fucking beer. I mean, my friends went to see Ride, you know, the band Ride last night here, and pints I think were $8.50, and they were complaining. And I said, well, yeah, it's Dublin. I mean, they're getting to €10. That's their goal. Just like it is in Paris, or I mean, you know, it's like in America. You go to a gig in America and a pint could be $20 just for a beer.
yeah, but like also America has had the same thing that, like, you know, you could go to a dive bar in, you know, Lower East Side or somewhere in Jersey and get a beer for $1, you know.
Sure.
So,
I won't say $1, but you could get one for $6 or $4.50 or $5.50. Yeah. I don't think you're going anywhere getting a beer for $1. But just, I mean, at gigs, it's just like it's accepted now. Hey, you're at your experience. Shut the fuck up. It's going to be this expensive, and that's how it is. And it's crept into the sort of metal thing in the sense that they're not, I mean, I totally understand it. Like there's an awful lot of transient people who aren't really that interested in what you're doing. They're there to get fucked up and have a drink and have, you know, sunshine in a nice area. And I totally get it. And they're not going to buy your shirt. I get it. They're like, you know, pretty cool. Like this. That's cool. But it's almost getting to a stage now where we're kind of going, is there any point bringing this luggage, €60 between 3 flights? And, you know.
Yeah. We do exactly the same, man. And, you know, that's not to say that whenever you're off doing your own shows, like you're not able to sell thousands of bucks of merch every night, because, you know, we all do. It just seems that people are not in that sort of headspace, you know.
But even those figures are coming down. You know, they're not what they used to be. No, it's just something I noticed this summer was like great gigs, very cool summer, very chill. Really enjoyed playing, but I noticed like every time I went to the merch stand up 12 to collect the stuff, it was like, here you go, €418 or whatever. And you're like, okay, that just about pays for the bag to go back and forth and the shipping and everything else. And you're like, okay, what we did is I dragged this huge bag through the mud to have the ability for people to buy a shirt, which actually at the end of the day made no one absolutely anything. Well, except the people who printed the shirt and, you know, everything else, you know, and the people who took the commission from it, you know. But anyway.
Yep.
Yeah, again, this is a terribly cranky, bitchy fucking second half.
Super bitch mode, look. I haven't even gone on to festivals charging you for shuttles yet, like, you know, which is the ultimate. Look at this reaction.
Charging you for a shuttle. Fuck you. It's just like I noticed my friend said it, and she said to me, she just goes, Alan, it's late stage capitalism where everything is about marginal gains and the consumer has no rights, and everybody just goes, well, it's expected that we fuck you for everything because that's just how it is now. So shut the fuck up and accept it. And I was like, yeah, it kind of does feel like how it is sometimes, you know. So maybe you should need we can put that as the name of the podcast: Victims of Late Stage Capitalism. Put that in a lyric.
It's a very thrash metal.
Yeah, isn't it?
Type.
We are the victims of late stage capitalism. Sounds a bit like
it. Did you see any of Evil Dead's recent lyric videos? Did you know?
Oh no, are they good?
No, they're not good.
I
guess if you're a fan of Evil Dead's music, it's pretty cool. But like the lyrics and the singing in it are
you've gone so niche that like there's about 25 people who know what we're talking about. I mean, I do remember Annihilation of Civilization. That's a record from what, 88, 89? And
yeah, that's great.
The first song was called FCI brackets The Awakening.
Yeah.
Proper nerd stuff.
Anachronisms are super cool. You don't really see them on records anymore. You don't get any anachronisms or fucking initializations, do you?
This was like this was like FCI / The Awakening. What's that? What's that fucking abbreviation? The Awakening. It wasn't parenthesis or brackets. It was like FCI / The Awakening. What's that called?
You know, I'm pretty sure it's just a fucking bracket, is it, or a fucking slash? I'm not sure.
Let's call it a bracket then.
Would you say it's actually something that's nearly specific to thrash metal? The idea of wanting to put ... or bracket or slash into your song titles, or
you cut me off there. I was about to say bracket and hinge. It's a very. Do you think anyone will get that reference? Except my dead grandmother. Bracket, the awake. Yeah, I mean, it's a very thrash metal thing, isn't it? To put like, here's the abbreviation and here's what it means in brackets, you know?
Yep.
I mean, I'm trying to think.
Brackets are nearly there, like where it's kind of like, you know, here, by the way, in case you're stupid, this is what we're talking about. Like, you mightn't have got it from our just set of initials that we have here before.
FYI, for your information, or something like this, you know. Well,
yeah, that's what it always ends up being, is something really stupid, and the king of that stupidity is MZA by Loudness, which stands for My Zebra's Ass.
Does it?
They had to come up with that. Yeah, they came up with that after they shouted MZA, because they said MZA sounds really cool thing to shout. And then when people were like, what does that mean? You heard something in the lyric book, they were like, it means My Zebra's Ass.
I might have to put then the video of us in rehearsal actually playing this for people who don't know. We had a covers band where Joe had to actually go, you had to do those backing vocals.
Yeah.
So,
and it was glorious. Very, very glorious.
Yeah, good song. But like the Evil Dead, that's a very niche kind of thing. I mean, was it as good as the, what's his name? Nosferatu, fucking Hellstar. Did you see him trying to get out of his coffin at Hell's Heroes? James.
Yeah, that was unbelievable, wasn't it?
It was one of the most amazing bits when he couldn't actually get out of the coffin that they brought him on stage in the day.
Yeah, like I guess the way that he's thinking in his head is it's going to be like a Screaming Jay Hawkins style, like super voodoo ritual that's going to have James Brownie type overtones.
Do you really think he's thinking? Do you really think he's thinking about Screaming Jay Hawkins though? Do you really think he's thinking about that?
No, I don't think so. I think he's just a man who, like I'm not talking shit about him because he's an amazing singer and like, you know, a cool guy.
We're fans of Hellstar, so yeah.
He seems like someone who, pretending to be a vampire, has taken over his life, much in the way that like a young girl might pretend that she's a cat and then start insisting on being called a cat, like, you know.
I'll tell you what though, I mean, I'm disappointed that at some stage you didn't try and write songs with him and invite him to up to the old crawling mansion, because that would have been perfect for him to creep around on the stairs and creep around down the place.
You should link this one as well if it's humanly possible. He did a version of Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears, and it's like it's the ultimate. So it is. It's unbelievable in every sense.
It is
I
one
don't
of
know.
my It's one of my favorite things, though. It's one of my favorite things. But what I like is the guys who are kind of like the background guys who are like, you can imagine the conversation like, what are you going to wear that for the video? You got to put on the chains and the whatever. And it's like, oh, for fuck's sake, really? I have to wear this fucking leather waistcoat and this, or maybe they're all just bang into it, I suppose,
Yeah, I think there's always a thing like you can see like the bass player or the guitar player will be playing his guitar up here,
Yeah.
something a bit of a giveaway that they're like, I don't really want to do this, but he's part of my church group and I kind of have to look.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, um, I remember trying to do rehearsals with someone who shall remain nameless, and they played a guitar without a headstock to try and get the gig, and I was like, no. Before you even played a note, I was just like, no, this is not. Yeah, just
There you
not.
go. It's exactly like that bit in that awful fucking black metal movie where the guy goes up and says, "Oh, like you like the scorpions? I can never speak to you ever again."
And he's called kind of like Jeff Dark Wave or something, or Dark Castle, or Barry Manowar.
Barry Manilow was a great name for a band, so it is.
He's fucking brilliant. Barry Grimfrost or something, you know what I mean? And he's like, I can't have it if you like that, But yeah, I mean, it's well, I mean, I was just like, no, there's not a chance I'm standing on stage with somebody who's playing a guitar with the guitar has no headstock. You just forget about it. Doesn't matter if you're any good. I'd rather take the guy who's awful, who at least was playing an Ibanez Destroyer. I just couldn't, My brain kind of compute.
Like I'm imagining though, this is like opening up the whole bunch of other possibilities. Would you ever play a gig with somebody who was wearing a tie and a white shirt?
A tie and a white shirt. Yeah, maybe. It depends. If we're doing I could do Motorhead covers wearing a suit. I think that could be pretty cool. But that's only because Lemmy did it already. Or maybe if it was a bit gothy, I could do it. What kind of tie and white side do you mean? Like, do you mean like, are we talking Billy Ocean now, or what are we talking?
Yeah, more of a like Robert Palmer type. Maybe it's a leather tie,
I could live with that. More than I could live with, like, sort of wearing all the black metal stuff and then having a guitar with no headstock.
But sure, the black metal person of all time is that cool dude Mantis, who brought out that amazing song Mantis.
Well, he did she's a dreamer, she's something. What is it called? The one, the Mantis. It's from the album, the Winds of Change album. It deceived about that girl. She's like on a night out in Sunderland or something.
The sheets and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, it's an amazing video. It's one of the best videos ever. She's a deceiver.
Yeah, and like everybody's in it as well. Like there's Al Barnes from Venom and Tony Dolan, and everyone is being like super like, check out the moves, like,
Well, especially the keyboard player. He's like,
they've all been going to Mantis's gym and fucking hitting it like crazy.
But the best thing about that video is that they're playing like a basement in like Sunderland or Newcastle, and this girl who's like a sort of office girl she disappears into the dressing room of the band, of course, and comes out dressed like rock. And it's just like, it's the most dingy, dreary, depressing looking Sunderland basement nightclub that you can imagine, with a couple of flashlights on the stage. And, it's not exactly.
Thing, man, like, see, if you think about it, that video is the culmination of what he left Venom for. Like, that's why he left the band, because he was all like, these people have offered me this solo deal to make a Top Gun style soundtrack album, and it's going to be fucking cool. And with this song called Deceiver, there's going to be a huge video. It'll be brilliant.
Yeah, it's a cocaine decision, really, isn't it? I mean, it's like 3 in the morning. Oh, we
the Metal City video where they all arrive in their like horses or themes and all that sort of shit. Yeah. It gives you an idea of how affluent they were, and they were like, you know what? I deserve more than this. I deserve like Deceiver heights of goodness. Like, or what was Kronos' awful album that he brought out, his solo record?
Singing in the Fire, Dancing in the Fire, I think it was 89. It wasn't as bad as Mantis's one, though. No,
come on. Deceiver by Mantis is actually a cool record. Look, what are you talking about?
Well, in hindsight, it's probably... But you guarantee there was some night where they were all up in different rooms in a hotel doing coke with their different set of friends going like, you know what, you deserve more than what Venom has to offer. You're right. We should be in Vegas. We should be in LA right now doing this, not in the fucking Premier Inn, Dunstable or Barnsley or Sunderland, you know?
And that's the awful thing about all this bullshit is that, like, after all the nonsense of these bands breaking up and all, they all end up going back to Neat Records, to Impulse Studios to go and make the same sounding records. It's not as if anyone was like, right, we actually made a record with Michael Wagner. Well, apart from Raven, you know.
Yeah, there's some people who tried to, but you get the impression they were just like, it's just down the end of my street. It's just there. I can just go there. Be fucking grand, man.
The man who runs the chip shop also does mastering. You know?
Yeah, I mean, none of those records are like, you don't hear them and go, fucking hell, they're destined for. Oh, yeah, destined for 1 million copies. If anybody's never seen it, it's called Metal City. It's like the Neat Records sort of like video compilation from about 83. It has Saracen, it has Raven, it has Warfare. No, it doesn't have Raven, actually. It has Warfare, it's amazing, in the studio. It has Venom, the making of Nightmares, and leading up to Possessed and stuff. Or Possessed and then Nightmares, I don't know. Yeah, Possessed is before Nightmares, 85, 86. It's absolutely fucking amazing. The Neat Metal City. I mean, it's one of the best things ever.
It's unbelievable. So it is.
The secretary at the start is like, hello, Neat Records. How you doing? All right, Kronos. All right, Kronos.
So, like, for the video for Nightmare, all of Venom arrive in their various cool, like, they've obviously been big fans of Song Remains the Same by Led Zeppelin.
Exactly.
And then that you get to see, like, each of the members being affluent in whatever their individual manners.
Smoking cigars. Kronos arrives on a horse and a cape.
He arrives on a horse. I think he might have a scythe. He definitely has a big fucking cape on.
Abandons in the back of a car. We did with a bottle of Jack Daniels and a girl with big blonde hair. Whereas Mantis in his little sports car.
Mantis is kind of trying to bring himself all across as the kind of Glenn Tipton of the situation, I guess.
I thought he was trying to come across like the Saint or something, you know, kind of like sort of like James Bond style character, you know, pencil tie and, you know, and
one of the weird things is like around that kind of period, you'll totally see either Abaddon or Kronos were tour managing a bunch of bands. Like both of them tour managed Nuclear Assault tours or Nasty Savage tours and all those kind of Paul Cook, who would have been What It Comes' brother.
Oh yeah.
He was like the guy who used to organize a bunch of tours for those kind of American bands under one flag or Music for Nations, you know.
So it must have been like Avenger tours or Rogue Mail tours or something like this, you know.
Yeah, like, isn't that a crazy thing that, like, apparently Rogue Mail at one stage had interest from what are they called again? Metallica's management, Q Prime.
Well, I mean, that album, that, you know, Crazy, Crazy Motorcycle, that's a pretty cool record. I mean, I have that. What's it called?
I think is it called Terminator, or is it just because it has the Terminator on the front?
Yeah, I think it might be called Interceptor or something like this. But it's a good record. I mean, I like it, you know.
They have a 12-inch single from 1989 called Belfast, and it's got a Union Jack and a tricolor and two hands kind of shaking hands in the middle. Like.
Really?
Yes. And if we had the
Well, what do you think about that?
What's it called? The First Wave?
It's called First Visit. And I mean,
it doesn't have Belfast on it, does it?
No, I mean, it's got Get Off My Back on it, which is important. It's got Crazy, Crazy Motorcycle. For anybody who likes the band, what's that fucking grindcore band? They had a band, Genocide SS. They're really famous grindcore band where the guy, Misko, he died in the tsunami. Fuck off. Come on, brain. Have a bunch of their records. Like the biggest Swedish grindcore band. My brain is blanking. I keep thinking Dysphere. Anyway, they do a killer cover of Crazy Motorcycle. I'll remember it in a minute. But yeah. It's got happily don't know. It's got side two. Wait a second. Side two opens with Dressed Incognito.
How would you describe Rogue Male's music?
Um, I mean, it's sort of like Mad Max inspired, futuristic. Take that with a pinch of salt. Sort of like boogie bar rock and roll with some sort of um other
It's a
kind
bit
of
more waspy than that, though, man, isn't it? Like,
bit
it's
more what?
definitely it's like a bit more wasp. Like, it's got a wasp influence, certainly.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, it sounds a little bit like maybe Wendy O. Williams sometimes, you know, or even at the Rods sometimes, just very simplistic, sort of bass driven. I don't think it's bad at all. I mean, it took me a while to find it. It was the last or that I looked under my collection, but I was quite happy to find that record. I quite enjoyed that record. I listened to it.
would you describe it as one of those British metal albums, kind of like the Martial Law one, where it's like, oh, this is underrated, you should give this a push?
I think it's underrated. I think that they were probably laboring under illusions of grandeur in the mid 80s that they were going to be the next big thing. But I think maybe the boat had left already. But it's not bad. I mean, and it's also not a lo-fi record. It's not a bargain basement record. Like it sounds like a quite big record, even when you play it. I was only playing it like maybe a month or two ago to a friend of mine, and she was like, this is pretty killer stuff. You know, when you first hear the Plasmatics or something, especially maybe Coup d'etat, no, maybe not the debut, and you're struck by the like big snappy drum sound, and I don't think it's bad, you know.
I was actually, and it might sound fucking completely out left field, but I thought that their production always had a bit of a Sisters of Mercy vibe with the drums, kind of like, you know, that's so far so good, so what, where it was very
Yeah,
like, as you
very,
did it,
very reverse reverby, big snare. Yeah, I need to
but
find out what the name of that grindcore band is, or it's going to fucking bug me. So keep talking.
while you're up there, definitely look up the cover of Belfast by Rogue Male so you can witness the unbelievable glory of the EP cover.
And we are born of hate. Nazem. Okay, fuck off. Like, sorry, Johnny King. Yeah, Nazem. I forgot Nazem. Anyway, they were the band guys Nazem. They did this other side band, like, so they're taking the piss a bit, but it's really good. And they do a fucking Joy Division cover and a Rogue Male cover. Crazy Motorcycle. There you go. Anyway, so what was the other question?
I don't know. What was the other question, Alan?
I mean, what can you say after for anybody who's confused as to the other Gallagher brothers?
Yep. And there's a pun that you might be missing there. It's the band are called Raven, and the EP is called Mad. So they're saying, "We're bloody Raven mad, lads.
We're Raven mad, man. We're Raven mad, man." But like, that's the cover. Would you put that as the cover? I mean, look, that's fucking amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think it was like a definitely, if you look at the cover of the previous album, which I presume you do not have a copy of, the pack is back, like, you know.
I do have. I have about 4 or 5 Raven records that I've accumulated over the years. I was never a huge Raven fan. I have obviously the first 2, and then I have various other ones. Life's a Bitch, with like Pick Your Window and stuff. But those 2 records just happen to be beside each other in my collection. That's not. I mean, you could see why, couldn't you?
Yep, because they're both in that same league of, like, you know, I don't know, partly low budget. The thing is, like, about 15 years ago, those records would have been like €2 or €1.
Yeah,
you
which is when I bought them.
Big massive record for it and got all those records for nothing, like, you know.
Mm.
So back in the day, there was no fucking gamble to be made going and getting them, like, you know.
Well, let me ask you this: do you think that somewhere right now, right this moment, 1 or 2 or 3 or all members of Rogue Male are sitting around telling somebody in a bar somewhere in the Midlands, "I fucking almost made it, man. We're on the way back. We're on the way back. We're making fucking demo. We're coming back. We're back on TV before you know it."
In fact, I know a dude who played guitar for them about 6 or 7 years ago, and he was saying the same sort of shit. You know, like, I still know the guys at Elektra Records, and they're just like, when the demos are ready, send them in, like, you know.
Wow. Like, I mean, in a way, I kind of admire that, because I'm guarantee you we're still sitting in a bar, like something like the West Riding or something in fucking Dunstable, wearing leather pants, with a sort of thinning version of the same haircut. They had marvelous hair, did Rogue Male. And still telling somebody about how they're on the comeback trail, you know?
On the road to victory. There you go.
But
well, I hope the Rogue Mail do make a comeback and we all look like fools and we're sitting there with the egg on our face, a Halloween video, being all like, holy shit, Rogue Mail are now the new Oasis and they're doing 4 nights at the park.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm a bit confused. Well, not a bit confused. It's unusual. Isn't it unusual how some bands make a moderate kind of dent in things and come back a little bit to the point where they're invited to play Muscle Rock and Headbangers Open Air, and maybe they keep it true warm up, and they can do like, you know, a Mithra or something can come back and do, or 3 or 4 or 5 shows a year, and they can dine out on that, and it's fucking brilliant for them. Imagine they never got to play in 1982, 81, come back, play to all the, you know, all the people who like them in the one place. And I really don't mean that in a patronizing way. I think it's fucking great. They don't go on tour and they don't ruin the whole thing. But how come Rogue Mail, what is it that stops them? Is it the fact that they tried to do this futuristic other thing? Like, how come they're not being invited to play Muscle Rock or, you know? I want answers. I want answers.
I was going to say, like, maybe it's one of these things like Tokyo Blade where they have a very limited audience, but like Tokyo Blade have definitely played somewhere like Muscle Rock, so
they have to have.
Be considered unpopular, or like there's a whole bunch of bands of that Avenger, New Waltham, Newcastle scene who've never played that festival. So
we played once with Avenger at Headbangers Air warm up in 2006. We played with Avenger, and they were fucking great. They were really good. If I'm not incorrect, the singer wore a cape for the opening song.
Excellent. There you go.
And then we spent most of the night. We spent most of the night arguing about who would win in a fight: peak era Brian Johnson or peak era Kronos in a fist fight in a bar.
Brian Johnson.
Yeah, I think easily. Brian Johnson. He was saying, fucking Kronos, man, in a fucking heartbeat. And I was like, oh, I don't know, man. I'd have my money on Brian Johnson 81 with the guns, proper guns, not fucking guns, you know?
Yeah, and like, I don't know, like Kronos has always just sort of appeared in some way a tiny bit frightened, like, you know, like, and Brian Johnson seems like a huge man who's used to being punched in the middle of the face. So,
well, Brian Johnson was like a fucking, I mean, he was like a mechanic or something, wasn't he? In 1970 in Wales or something.
A paint shop man. And he took a day off the paint shop to go down to London to audition for the AC/DCs.
To sing in an ad, and didn't know it was singing for AC/DC. Yeah, my money's on fucking Brian Johnson all day. And every now and again over the last couple of years, I've brought back up that argument. I'd have Brian Johnson 1981 all day.
Yeah, and it's like one of those things, like, it seems like whenever you're like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar versus whoever, like, Brian Johnson's fist is probably about that size, and Kronos' fist is probably very Mr. Burns-esque, because he looks quite like Mr. Burns, like, you know.
No, so. I mean, and hang on, in fairness to Kronos, in fairness to Conrad, I mean, peak era Kronos. We're talking like 1989, you know, hanging off like Jim, you know, Gold's gym top, Dancing in the Fire era Kronos. I'm not talking about like, I'm talking peak era Kronos versus peak era Johnson. Johnson 81, Kronos 89, 88. So, you know.
See, it's the battle of the Newcastle lads, isn't it? Like, you know.
This is it. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a fascinating question. I mean, I think solve that and you solve the Middle East. You know what I mean?
Okay. I'm going to send Tony Dolan in to solve this situation, because he would know exactly what to do. And he's definitely a man who would be very used to punching people in the middle of the face as well. So
he's a big lad, all right, isn't he? His Instagram is lots of, he was supposed to come on and we'd arranged it, and you were supposed to be the other interviewer, and then he went off to South America playing music or something instead of coming on this. I mean, can you imagine?
It's always a bunch of like sort of alien-free, baddie looking like lads like that. Like, sort of, he has that sort of, you can see why he went into acting, because he just looks like a very intimidating person. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because he was, of course, in Pirates of the Caribbean. We should have kept. We'll keep this for his interview. You have to hit him up as well, because he knows you. Doesn't know me from anywhere. You know.
Yeah, I'll give him a shout. So I'll
Other
get
than
him
I
on
was
the.
a, other than I was a big fan of Primeval, and I think it's fundamentally a better record than Possessed, probably. You know.
It is a better record than Possessed. Like I was going through a bit of a Venom deep dive there, and like trying to find stuff that I hadn't listened to or wasn't super familiar with. I'm sure I've talked about this before with you. The Kissing the Beast record.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So it's like the last thing they did with the Demolition Man lineup in like 1992, and
So like
it's
the Wastelands, and so you've got Temples of Ice after. You've got Primeval is like 89. I think Temples of Ice is 90, and then 92 is Wastelands, which is a weird
yeah,
record. It has like Venom written in red side on. It looks like a computer game, a cheap, shitty
yeah.
computer game, which really put me.
The ultimate insult to abandon the logo after so
Oh,
long. Even had that weird shit looking version of it on the Primeval
I.
record.
It's the first Venom. That's the first Venom record. The first Venom record I ever didn't buy when it came out. I ended up with it on cassette. I don't own it on vinyl. I don't own it on CD. I used to have it on cassettes. And when now Temples of Ice have been record and Primeval, I really loved it. I had a Primeval shirt and everything. I bought the shirt and the record in 1989. Tear Your Soul Apart, I have somewhere as well. I mean, to say I prefer it more than Possessed is a stretch, but I do think it's probably a better record. But I mean, I find it hard to argue with Satanicus and Too Loud for the Crowd. But Possessed is it's a kind of awful, good, kind of
The thing
awful record,
about At War with Satan and Possessed
Oh no, I
is
love a war. Don't put a war with Satan in with Possessed. I love a war with Satan. That's very different
like
than Possessed.
those songs always have songs that are like they'll just go like "Light Trap" about 10 times or whatever the name of the song is. What was the song you just mentioned there? It's the same thing where like it's always like these exact
Kiss, Satanicus. No, I won't have it. That A War with Satan is a classic. That's a fucking Stonewall classic. Possessed is just. It's like they had no songs, a couple of riffs, too much cocaine. Engineer was obviously doing gack as well. Like it's a terrible sounding record. And at the time, they must have been aware that like Slayer's getting big, Metallica's getting big, everybody's coming up, and they make this almost worse sounding record. Like Possessed is a fucking sonic mess.
The thing that I really don't understand about Venom is that like even under the Neat Records banner, like Raven went to London and made a record with Michael Wagner. All
Yeah.
for One sounded amazing. It sounded like an American record
Yeah.
and gave them a proper career in America. Now, Raven were never as big as Venom, but Raven were able to move to America and go and do 300 shows a year for whatever. But it's weird that Venom were still so like, right, no, we'll just stay in Newcastle at Impulse. We're never going to get like a producer who can tame us and like, make a record that's actually like even a Ride the Lightning style record that might
Yeah.
have timing issues, but it still sounds great. Like.
Yeah. I mean, like Venom were on the sort of downward curve. Like it's no way they were winning any new fans in 85. I mean, I will say that Nightmare is a great sounding EP. Like Nightmare as a song, which is not unpossessed, it's 86. Nightmare is the last gasp of that band, and it's a brilliant song. I think Nightmare is fucking classic. And I do have the Deadline demo vinyl. It still sounds like dog shit, but on the In Memoriam double CD in 1990, it came out. There is Love Amongst the Dead. Love Amongst. There's a couple of songs. There's a Casta, Under a Spell, Love Amongst the Dead, and something else that are from the Deadline 87, 86 sessions. And it sounds fucking great. It's before Calm Before the Storm. And that album has never been released, which is the three of them. It's never come out. Like, why not fucking release that now? I mean, you probably get a reasonable advance. And some of the songs are, at least The Chanting of the Priest was on it, I think, which of course was on, Calm Before the Storm. But it's a kind of the missing Venom album. And like I said, I have it on vinyl, but the bootleg of it is so shit. Yeah, like you couldn't even really play it. But then the money was spent on Calm Before the Storm.
Probably know what sort of appeal that would have for. Like I'm a huge fan of the Diamond Head demos when they were trying to do the kind of Journey war stuff in when was that, like 1984? But you would imagine most people who like Am I Evil don't want to hear that. And I think it's the same kind of thing that if you like, fucking black metal, you're probably not going to really like Deadline or that era.
Deadline wasn't an Aori kind of record. It Calm Before the Storm, when they got rid of Mantis, was a more Aori kind of move. A Deadline is still more like Nightmare, a bit more polished, bit heavier, a bit better drum sound and stuff. I mean, it's still, like I said, there's two songs or at least one or two. Like I said, Love Amongst the Dead is on that In Memoriam sampler, and it sounds great. I mean, no, I haven't listened to it in a while, but it sounds great. And I think, like, release the fucking thing to 5,000 vinyls now or some whoever wants it. But I mean, by then you got leaving after that.
You know, the Metallica demo, the No Life to Lever.
Yeah.
You kind of need everybody's sign off to be able to re-release it, and they probably are in a situation where the three Venom guys, they don't want to sign off. Look,
I think if they were each given 15,000 euro or sterling, they might fucking release it.
Would you want to do that? Would you want to be like, I project this to sell at least 45,000?
Oh, no. You'd never do anything like that, but you might do the guts of 10,000 vinyls. Which,
yeah, you probably would.
If you put it in a really nice thing, it's like the missing ever Venom record, you might do 6 or 7, which would pay for a 30,000, 35,000 advance,
Yeah, I guess it would. Like, it's one of those weird things that, like, Venom fans, it's a lot like being a fan of, like, any huge band like Maiden or something, where they're into collectibles. So no matter what they bring out, if they bring out 500, 500 7-inch or whatever, or 1,000 7-inch, they're going to sell it out, no problem.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I mean, I don't buy everything by Venom anymore, but I still couldn't resist, the church sessions and the unreleased thing with all the songs from 79 and 80. And I didn't buy the box set of all the 7-inches I can see to my right in another box of the new made versions of the same 7-inches. Like, I don't buy the same thing of the thing that I have. Like, I didn't buy the box sets of To Megatherion, and which has the Tragic Serenades. I mean, I have Tragic Serenade, I have them. And unless there's something really, really, I don't know, I tried to stop myself buying the €100 box sets that I just put away in the collection beside all the other ones.
I wanted to get the Metallica ones just because the books and stuff would be really good. I love that Metallica book. Did you read it? The Back to the Front, the one about Master Puppets.
But didn't the Ride the Lightning ones have like the demos on vinyl and stuff in it? Didn't it?
Yeah, well, like, you can listen to all that sort of stuff online, and it's all really, 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 really good. Like, they should have done to go. But the book that they did about Master Puppets, they did a kind of divided version of the same book along with the Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, Master Puppets reissues, and they're all supposed to be amazing.
Did you buy all them now? Do you bought all those Master Puppets and Ride the Lightning?
I didn't buy the vinyls. I bought the giant book that came along with the Master Puppets one. It's a big, massive coffee table book about the making.
You could buy the book separate to the records.
Yeah.
Because,
but it was really good.
Yeah, I mean, the Ride the Lightning one, it looked like I wanted that. It was like €100, and it had the demos, I think, on vinyl, and the Master Puppets had the demos. And if anybody's never heard the demos of those records, they're fucking brilliant. Like, they really are fucking great, I mean, there's variations of whole bits of songs, and there's different singing, and like Fight Fire with Fire demo is off the fucking, it's insane. Like, it's almost faster than the bloody record. Like,
one of the best things on all the demos is they've got Jason Newsted's audition tapes, or whenever he came to audition with Metallica.
Really?
And they're really good. Yeah, they're like, and the bass is like super loud, and they're starting off with like Battery and Creeping Death, and they're all like 10 BPM faster than they are on the record, and he's just slaying it. Like, he's very, very good bass player.
Yeah, classic. And did you watch that recent, like, last 2 or 3? I know we're descending into Metallica talk, which is fine, but the last 2 or 3 years, there was an interview with the engineer of Injustice for All that popped up on. It looks like there's like sort of slime sort of slowly coming down your screen at the top. These two little, what you call it, these kind of things. No, it's behind you, actually.
They're delightful pictures of children.
Oh, well. But did you watch the interview with him? And he was just like, Ulrich came in and went, yeah, turn the bass down to nothing and turn the treble up, Because, I mean, I've seen that on is it the original cassette? It says, turn the bass down. He's written in pen for people because he wanted them to sound like tinny,
Yeah, get more of that attack. They started Let It Loose by Salvage.
From Loose and Lethal, is it?
Yeah. That's exactly the sort of sound that Lars wanted. And I suppose just because Hetfield and Lars were in control, they could be like, half of the sonic mix is going to be the drums and the other half is going to be the guitars, and they're going to take up all the bass and mid and treble frequencies, so there's no room for any bass. But I don't know why people find it so surprising. It's like their bass player was crushed to death in an accident about a year before, so they didn't want to have any bass on the record, and you're like, okay.
Is that the real reason, do you think? Or
Well, I would believe subliminally that that's why, or like that would make sense to me. I don't really know why, because the thing is, they had managers like who were responsible for making Def Leppard and AC/DC and Dokken records in the mid to late '80s that spent hundreds of thousands making, and like I'm sure Injustice for All cost like many thousands of bucks, like maybe $100,000 to make.
Yeah, probably, no doubt, no doubt.
It's not as if they were sitting going like, yeah, just whatever, lads. I'm sure they made some conscious decision to say, listen, just leave them be. Like, these two lads know what they're doing, so just get them to bring out the record and it'll be fine.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like I don't remember. The thing about it is, I think that looking back on it, it seems crazy now. When you listen to Injustice for All, and you listen to it now, and you go, "What the fuck? Where's the fucking bass?" I don't remember reading any reviews in '88 that were like, "Where's the fucking bass?" Because it feels like we were all a little bit more ignorant of sonics back then. Even though records, they spent tons of money putting them into records, nobody really knew that much about why does Dokken sound huge and is it the bass and whatever. I never saw any reviews which were like, what the fuck is going on with the bass end? Like, it was only in the fullness of time when people began to understand more about engineering, and I think through social media, people went, hang on, wait, what? There's no fucking bass in this record,
Probably also because whenever a lot of people were listening to Injustice for All originally, they were listening to it on Walkmans with like shitty headphones.
Yeah.
Like, until you got old enough to have your own sound system that you could be turning up albums loud and critiquing the production a bit. Like, when you're young, you're a bit more like, yeah, it sounds cool. This song's about a guy who has no legs. This is amazing. Like,
yeah, I mean, you're probably right. I mean, it's certainly I would have played it on a shitty stereo in '88, and I mean, you could hear it was different, but I never remember being in the schoolyard going, fucking Injustice for All has no bass. It was more like Injustice for All is very long. Why is it two bloody records long? And you wanted more songs like Dyer's Eve and Harvester of Sorrow, but it's such a weird step to have made, and it's a kind of like a fuck up, but yet at the same time, it's hard to argue what the album represents,
The longness of the songs actually ended up not really, like, nobody really cares. Like, I know there are Metallica fans who do, but like songs like Injustice for All and To Live Is To Die and things that are really long and drawn out, you started seeing that, I guess, a bit more on the Load and Reload albums, and like since then, where I guess what happens is you don't have anybody telling you otherwise. When they were doing those other albums, like the ones in Denmark with Flemming Rasmussen,
yeah,
he was probably saying like the song should have this arrangement, or let's make this a 13-minute song. Like,
Well, I'll tell you what, there's probably absolutely no way Flemming Rasmussen would let them away with having no bass if he was recording Injustice for All. There's absolutely no way. I think he was a headstrong dude who seemed to have a very strong opinion of how things should be sonically. But do you think he would sit there and go, when they went, no, turn the bass off, he'd be like, get the fuck out of here, mix your own bloody record,
I could be wrong about this, but you can correct us in the comments, but I'm pretty sure that he only recorded those Metallica albums. Like, it was Michael Wagner mixed Master of Puppets, and I think Ride the Lightning, and your man, what's his face, Thompson, the guy you were talking about, he did Justice for All. So
you might be right. I'm trying to picture the back of Master of Puppets now in my head, and I'm trying to picture, do I see the words Michael Wagner underneath?
Oh yeah, like Michael Wagner definitely mixed that record, and and funny enough, in that big book about Metallica, he says that at the time the guys said, listen, we listened to that Dokken record you made under lock and key, and we want it to sound nothing like it. We want it to sound dry as a bone, so no reverb is allowed. And it's like, okay.
Well, that's just, yeah.
I really hope Alan
January
is not
19,
looking up the cover of Belfast by Rogue Mail.
January 1986 to Michael Wagner, who finished the album's mixing. So Rasmussen, it says, well, according to this, Rasmussen did begin to mix it, but didn't complete the mix. Interesting. Okay, I'm going to find the Rogue Mail. What was it called? Belfast. Whose idea was that?
Rogue Mail's idea, I believe. Look at this beauty.
Wait a second. Holy fuck. Let me just keep talking while I fucking try and bring this up.
I don't know how I can explain this apart from Rogue Mail kind of preceded the peace process, or maybe they were the thing that made the peace process happen. Like,
keep talking. Because I needed to save this to photos. It won't let me. You know the way the things are now. It won't let me.
Just put it up on the screen so the people of the city can understand what you're talking about. Like, you know.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. See?
What the fuck? Like,
maybe everything will be okay.
Do you think that they had a part to play in the solving of the peace process?
Yep.
It's like I would say, right, that went about 75% of the way to solving the peace process, right? And then when I saw Kiss, Paul Stanley went, yesterday we were in Belfast, and I know you guys had some problems with those guys up there, but I'm here to tell you all that you just gotta get along. And everybody went, yeah. And he goes, and you know, I don't know if you've ever seen Kiss, he rambles and he goes, anyway, and he goes into the Detroit Rock City. But he was just like, you guys just gotta get along. And I was just like, we all went, yeah.
We will. Thanks, Paul.
So, Paul and Rogue Mail. Rogue Paul Mail. I mean, those two bands and their gestures probably did more to solve the peace process than anyone else, really, when you think about it.
Would you say the opposite was true then of Dave Mustaine? Did he do more to further the troubles than anybody else?
I don't know. I'm not sure, really. I mean, let's stay on the positive side. That's incredible. I can't fucking believe that. I mean, I kind of want to go and hear it now. Like, are they trying to do like a Simple Minds sort of thing, you know, down on the waterfront or something? Or down the waterfront is
Hop yourself onto Apple Archive and check out the lyrics for it, and you can find
Simple Minds have an album called The Waterfront, don't they?
I think they have a song called Belfast, do they not?
Yeah, they do. And who's down on the jetty then? Is that Dr. Feelgood? This is proper nerd stuff. Anyway,
last week, me and my mates had tickets to Simple Minds, and we went into Brogan's pub, and we didn't go to the gig. We just stayed in Brogan's and had pints.
That's not a bad idea if the pints are good, you know.
We're very good.
Do you want to look? Do you want to? I mean, Simple Minds. It's weird as a band. They were sort of as big in a way, early '80s, as so many other bands. They were fucking huge, selling millions of records. They were on the fucking soundtrack to fucking one of the biggest movies the whole mid '80s. And by 2004, 5, I mean, they weren't a band who became musically respected in a way, you know.
They were part of that the big sound, like you know, Simple Minds, U2, Big Country,
yeah,
The Alarm. Who else was in that kind of over?
Yeah,
the Waterboy.
What was it? What would you even call that? What would you?
Jangly Steve Lillywhite Productions for you music out there.
What would you even call that kind of style of sort of like Celtic stadium rock or something?
Yeah, they used to self-describe themselves as the big sound. That's what all those bands described themselves as at that point.
The big sound.
Yeah, U2 and like The Alarm and Big Country and et cetera, and the Waterboys.
And the Big Bopper.
Wow.
Yeah.
Me. But funny, like, you know, like going back to Oasis again, man, like I can't believe we're turning around to this, but it's mad if we're talking about all those bands, like, you know, like could you two get away with charging $415 a ticket?
No, not unless they'd split up for 15 years. Or yeah, it's insane, this dynamic pricing. I mean, it's fucking disgusting. Just because there's You know, people queuing for fucking hours to get through to it. And I know people who are queuing for hours. My friend got up at 7 in the morning there, and you are 223rd, 3,000 in the queue, or whatever the fucking stupid shit it is. And then you get through, and it's put you into the dynamic pricing thing. So you either pay it or
They
fuck
were
off.
doing that Sleep Tokens UK tour last year.
What? Dynamic
Dynamic
pricing?
pricing. Apparently so.
Fucking hell. So that means
Yeah.
if you're on the ground in front, you're paying 200-300 sterling. I mean, that's what it's this thing, which is just like what's happening now is like, is this idea that going to a gig is a middle class concern, and you are going to pay for an experience, and within paying for that experience, like it's going to be basically the cost of a fucking holiday, 200, 300, 400 euro. You pay,
Yep.
get your hotel in the city. I mean, I know people who only go out 3 times a year and they splurge like a grand or a grand and a half on that night. They're like, we're coming into the city. We got a hotel. We're getting the bag in. We're fucking, let's go out fucking pinting. We're going 3 times a year, 3 times a year. And they just splurge on the whole thing. And they don't, when you say to them, like, you just spent like a fucking grand and a half on the experience of going to a gig. And then you spend most of the time filming yourself dancing on Instagram. Now, I mean, just saying peripherally know these people. But it's like, it feels like everything has moved into this space now whereby it's no longer like going to a gig is not a kind of ground bottom up working class concern about going to see a band who resonates with who you are as a person. It's like a middle upper class experience, and be damned if you're going to get a gig for fucking 50 or 40 or 30 or, you know, whatever. It's going to be 80 to 300-400 euro. And that's just how it is.
Part of the concern is like, are people who have spent $415 on an Oasis ticket going to go and see other gigs that year, or will they be like,
maybe 3?
I spent money. It's like going on holiday where you've done it for the year, you know.
They're going to go and see their ubiquitous dog shit, Bruce Springsteen, whatever bowl of slop, and they're going to see a couple of other things maybe, and they're going to have their 4 experiences, and they're happy to not happy, but they just don't. Look, Stevie Nicks was like what 400 fucking euro in the dynamic.
Well, Blink 182 was like 120 euro.
Yeah, and it just goes up and up, and then you're in the arena. You pay 10 euro for your pint, and it's just like it's not the. I think what it is because the idea of an Oasis gig is so far removed from where it came from, which is a small venue in Manchester to 100 people, like in whatever the fuck those gigs were for them, 1990 or 1991. Like that whole experience is so out of where it actually came from, which is like a small venue in a working class area where people go and booze and go and see a band, and for £6 or whatever it is, it's like, oh, it's fucking Oasis. And they're from the street next to the one where we come from. That is like a fairy tale. That is an ancient history. And now it is all just a huge, just disgustingly sort of gargantuan, inflated experience that, when you go there, I mean, it just leaves you completely cold. You're like, stand over there, sir, walk over there, stand over there. I mean, you're out 10:15, you're just out back into the city, and you've had your 1.5 hours of Live Nation. And I think what it is that this kind of live music has been so removed from its origin story that no one actually would believe that a band like that, oh, once upon a time we saw them in Whelan's for £6. And so therefore, don't you owe something to the people who put you where you are? No, it's all dynamic pricing. And it's like, I heard the story that all the hotels in Dublin, when the Oasis gigs were announced, they just cancelled everyone's bookings on that weekend. Just cancelled and went, fuck off, €1,000 a room.
Yep. That is the sad reality of it, man.
Yeah.
And, I've got a couple of mates who were him and han about going to SEDC, and they were like, I can afford a ticket for Mr. Big and Richie Kotzen and Therapy and all. Like, I can afford tickets for like 7 gigs, or I could go and see 2 guys from SEDC, one of whom is Scott,
Or you fly to Slovenia and stay in a nice hotel and have a weekend in Slovenia and go and see the gig in Bratislava and still come back with money saved on what it is to go and see 2 shows or 2 tickets for AC/DC standing in Dublin on the floor. and go, fuck, Bratislava is pretty cool, isn't it? Like if you could have done that. But I totally get it. It's disgusting. It's that this entire thing has just become a sort of it's just become a sort of middle upper class experience. It's something for the gram. It's
and there's a whole bunch of bands out there like your Mr. Bigs or Big Countries or Haircut 100s or whoever the fuck who if they tried to charge 60 quid for their tickets, people would not dream of going to their gigs. You know what I mean? So it's like,
and rightfully
even
so, yeah.
like a legendary band like the Stranglers, if they tried to charge $60, people would be like, "We're not going."
And to think about
so few people's favorite band that you can't do that, you know.
And to think about it, that is all because I bought this fucking tracksuit.